Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. I can see quite a few new faces again, which is great. And I can also see a few people who were here last time. Who was here last time? Can you? Oh, good. And the rest of you were not. So, this is making the story interesting. Last time we spoke about Martin Heidegger's first part of his philosophical endeavor, mainly focusing on his masterpiece, Being and Time. Since there is so much to be said about Martin Heidegger, I decided to split this lecture in two. So last time we did half of it, and tonight we're going to talk about his later part of his later philosophy, which started roughly around 1934. He published his Being and Time in 1927. The Shedevre, masterpiece. So I'm going to remind you, everybody who was here last time, about what we talked last time, just to connect the dots, and also to give a little introduction of the first part to people who were not here last time. So what is Martin Heidegger all about? Martin Heidegger was known to be the philosopher who killed metaphysics. This is how some of his scholars saw him. So he wasn't interested in metaphysics, as metaphysics was traditionally understood by philosophers since Plato, in which everybody took being for granted. So what is being? What is metaphysics doing? What is the main subject of metaphysics? This is the philosophy that covers the essence, the existence of being. Now, being was understood to be as an essence of everything, as everything that is, even God. But Heidegger is not interested in what is being. He is interested in how being is. How is that something is? What it means to be. When we say something is, what do you mean? What do we mean by that? So he wants to show us how being exists, in what ways we experience being, what are the modes of being. In order to explain that, Heidegger introduces quite a lot of new terminology. The most important one, the most famous, is his introduction of the concept Dasein, which means to be there. Dasein is a human being. We are there. To be there means that you are Dasein. Now, what is the difference between human being and a glass, human being and a table, a chair, a tree, an animal? The difference is that only human being can ask about the existence and essence of being. Only human being can ask how being is, and nobody else. So all these other things, they are around, but for Heidegger they don't exist. The only one that exists is a human being, is Dasein, because he is capable of asking the question, what is being and how being exists. Is this clear? Because it's just warming up. I threw a lot of sentences out there because it's not possible to simplify more.
I mean, I might have a question. So what is the main opposition to the classical metaphysics?
Your questions will come later. After just remember, right? So, Dasein, to be there. Now there are three modes of being in which beings actually unravels itself to us. Three modes of being. How do we experience being? First one is Dasein, as I explained, to be there. Second one is something that Heidegger calls ready to hand. Ready to hand tools and equipment. So what it means to be ready to hand. For example, hammer is ready to hand. When we use the hammer, or as he says, the carpenter uses the hammer, he doesn't think about the hammer. He doesn't analyze, doesn't look at the wooden part, the metal part, thinks about the weight, shape. He just uses the hammer. And in that usage, carpenter becomes a hammer. And hammer becomes a carpenter. That amalgamation of both of them creates that thing that he calls ready to hand. Are we okay with this? So ready to hand. For Heidegger, this is the case that there is no subject and there is no object. This is the difference between old metaphysics and new metaphysics. No subject, no object. In a ready to hand, nobody is subject, nobody is object. Everything is one. So we have the first attempt of fusion between something which is substantial, made of substance, and something which is human being or Dasein. So that fusion is, in a small picture, the picture of the world. Now Heidegger distinguishes between the world and the earth. Earth, that means rivers, mountains, valleys, rocks, sand, water, this is earth. But world, there is something different. This is where human being, Dasein, comes in. And earth and human being melt together. He asked his students on this subject, what will happen if you take man out of the world? The students guess wrong answers, sorry. And he says, well, the world will disappear. With us, the world disappears. What will remain is earth, but the world will go. So this is still being on time. There is much more to say about that. I spoke about last time 45 minutes, which is quite a lot. On my side, it's terrible on your side, I know. Too long and too heavy. So, contrary to Descartes and his philosophy of res cogitans, of thinking being, which influenced the Western thinking hugely, for Heidegger there is no such thing as thinking as res cogitans. There is no subject which thinks and object which is thought about. Everything is one. There were many attempts later on to criticize Descartes on that sentence, I think, therefore I am. Because in that sentence, as you can realize, he starts with I think. So he already is. He says I. So this is in a way contradictory in adjective. You cannot say I think and therefore I exist, because you are already there before you think. So Heidegger doesn't accept that. For him there is no division between the spirit that thinks and the world which is thought about. There is all one, and this is the world. This is a synthesis, amalgamation, fusion of object and subject in one. You can see there are some hints of direction of his later philosophy, in which he will pay more attention to the being with capital B rather than Dasein or beings as everything else around us. In Being and Time, Heidegger attempts to explain to us what authenticity means, what it means to be an authentic human being. There are two caveats on this road to authenticity. Number one is das Man, as he calls it, or the man, meaning everybody else. So das Man, or the man with a capital M, meaning everybody else, society, culture, history, religion. And they actually decide about us, about our thinking, about our ways of life, about our values, priorities, everything we do. So in a way, that traditional approach to life, traditional acceptance of das Man, culture, religion, politics, whatever else you want, kills authenticity. So he goes that far that, for example, Oscar Wilde sees the same problem, and he says that there are very few people who are actually themselves. Most of the people are other people. And he says their thinking is the other people's quotes. And then he continues in a different place. He says, I wonder if there is anything else I can call I. So you see that problem with authenticity. Because das Man decides about everything, meaning the world around us. Now, why is this important? This is important because one of the very important, very crucial trait of human being is something that he called thrownness. Thrownness means that when we are born, we are literally thrown into the world. And we are completely confused and shocked with everything around us. And again, he asked his students, what happens when baby gets born? What is happening to the baby in the first moment, when the baby opens hair of his eyes? And students said, well, baby is looking for a mother, a father, shelter, protection, food, warmth, love. He said, no. Baby is looking for the meaning of the world. It's just been thrown out into the world, which is there, already created. There is already culture there, there is already family there is already religion there, and a language there. And you will see why I'm saying all this in a few minutes. So this is where you are. You are literally thrown into the ocean and you have to swim now. Learn how to swim and find your way. So in that exercise of life, das Man decides most of it about you. And you fight for your authenticity. Or you don't. Most of the people don't. And they are very comfortable living those lives, as everybody else. But he says this is not authenticity. So the next caveat, the next problem with authenticity is actually the fact that we are mortal. So we're all gonna die one day. So Heidegger says, well, das Man, the world that you were thrown into, your beloved friends and family and your nation and your peers, they are around you all your life, they're talking to you all the best, they love you, they respect you. At least it seems like that. But he says, the day when you die, or you see the death coming to you, none of them will be able to do anything. So you're going to be left on your own. Because that, he says, is your ultimate reminder that you should live your life on your own. And you better do it as authentic human being. So this is all in being and time. You see how much Heidegger pays attention to Dasein, to human being. So Dasein is the driving engine in the spec of being, in that overall happening of everything. Dasein is the primary mover. The being is there to reveal itself, to unconceal itself, but the primary mover is actually Dasein. Everything orbits about Dasein. And he says, being needs Dasein in order to reveal itself. Being cannot reveal itself, unconceal itself, without Dasein. Very similar to Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, where you have a giver and receiver. Now the giver can be understood as the being, capital B, giver is the one that generates the knowledge and knows everything, but the point comes when that knowledge needs to be given. That happens to everybody who gets some knowledge and then he wants to give it away. And this is why creator needs a receiver, and he creates a receiver. This is how being needs Dasein in order to unravel itself. So this is in few sentences. These are main points about being on time. Just to remind you where he was in his first part of his philosophy. And then, after he finished being on time, he started developing different views. And while first part of his philosophy can be all learned from one book, which is Being on Time, the second part, known as the turn or return, is not condensed in one book. Is actually explained in a few different essays, lectures, and public speaking. It's quite complex. But because I wanted to make it a little bit easier for you, I will focus on few of his main. There are a few more, but I picked up 5 of his essays. The first one is published in 1930. It's called On the Essence of Truth, in which he speaks about truth. The second one is published in 1935, The Origin of the Work of Art. The third one published in 1953, The Question Regarding Technology. The fourth one, 1954, Building, Dwelling, Thinking. And in 1959, his last essay, called On the Way to Language. All of them having the same target, trying to show us that the being, as he understands, is the primary mover actually, not Dasein. And he enters few different areas, such as truth, art, technology, dwelling, and language, in which he tries to explain to us the essence and the meaning of every single subject of these 5 that I just mentioned. Now, some scholars have argued that Heidegger never wrote anything about ethics, and they see that as a big minus in his philosophy. And everybody else wrote about ethics. Everybody. All big philosophers wrote about ethics. But Heidegger never devoted himself or any single essay or any single book to ethics. The reason being is that I think everything he said, and you will hear now what he says in these main essays, that everything, not indirectly, but directly relate to ethics, without any need to be called ethics. Because for Heidegger, if we understand the being as he suggests, everything else will simply unfold, and we will find a way to act in this world as authentic Dasein, as, this is important, carer of the being. So for Heidegger, humans are carers of the being. They are not lord of the beings, of the being, they are carers. And you will see what it means. So it's not true, according to me, that Heidegger doesn't enter the waters of ethics I'm compelled to maybe write a few things on that and put it as an essay about Heidegger's ethics, and you will see why. So in the essence of truth, published in 1930, Heidegger talks about truth. Now, what was the traditional understanding of truth? Truth is like there was a correspondence theory of truth. Basically, what is true? If I say the glass is on the table, or people are sitting on the chairs, so I basically confirm something that we all see. So this is called theory of correspondence. But as a deep thinker, Heidegger thinks a little bit further than that. And he says, well, if that is true, then what about my true friend? How would you explain what is a true friend? Where is the theory of resemblance there? What is true friend? Friend who always talks truth? Friend who always agrees with me? If I say, glass is on the table, say yes, it is on the table. So is that a true friend because he is true? No, Heidegger said it's not, because he said there are different types of truth. There is a ontic truth. When he says this is my true friend, he thinks this is the person that I trust. This is person that I know for sometimes. I know he will be there for me. As Aristotle, for example, talks about real friendship. He spoke about that. So you see, there is nothing to do with correspondence theory. If you try to explain anything about the chair, what is the true explanation of the chair, says Heidegger? Oh, it's got 4 legs and it's made of wood and upholstery, maybe sometimes of metal. No, it says, you didn't explain much. The best thing you can do is just to sit on the chair and you will explain everything. So the meaning of truth is not simply that A equals A. It's a little bit deeper. This is ontic truth that he calls. And he is interested in that ontic truth. So where do we get that ontic truth? And why is that important? So Heidegger has inherited a lot of philosophy before him. He did help himself generously, not only from the philosophers, but also poets like Heine, Goethe, Novalis, Hölderlin, especially. If you read any of them, especially Hölderlin, as I will mention more in detail in a minute, you will see that he inherited a huge wealth of thinking in all the areas: ethics, aesthetics, politics, ontology, epistemic philosophy. So before him, we had people who wrote about art. Especially, we had Hegel, Kant before Hegel, then Hegel, Schopenhauer, an extremely exciting, extremely powerful aesthetics theory of art, the Nietzsche, and then you have Heidegger trying to add something new to it. And he sees in art unraveling, unconcealment of the being. And this is why art is important. Again, good art is not art that represents objects in the world as they are, as most of the people will think that is. For Heidegger, there's something else there, also as for Schopenhauer. But tonight we'll stick to Heidegger. Again, this is not the theory of correspondence. Art should not be photography. So what is art for Heidegger? Why is art so important? Because it unconceals being, unravels the being. The being unravels, opens itself to us through art. This is why it's essential. You see, now he's taking being as the most important, the primary engine of in this part of philosophy. So he says, for example, he mentions that in The Being and Time as well, but then he goes further. He says, take Van Gogh's shoes. You have a pair of shoes, the famous painting. Why is that so important for Heidegger? Most of the people will look at it and say, oh, Van Gogh, amazing shoes, look how beautiful they are, how real they are, amazing leather shoes. And they will miss the point. Heidegger says, no, there is much more to see there. Because what an artist, there's a medium through which we get that being open to us, is telling us, is showing us the world at that particular time, in that particular space, as it was. It captures the world. Being opens to us. So he says that pair of shoes, these are women's shoes. And you can see these shoes are worn out. They're very much worn out. So the peasant woman was wearing them every single day. But then he says you can see miles and miles of walking in those shoes. You can see all these muddy roads and muddy fields where she spent year after year after year working hard on the land, bending, lifting, digging, sometimes 10 hours a day or longer. And then she would go home worrying about her life, worrying about the next meal on the table, worrying about the next winter, worrying about children, will they have enough food to eat, walking in those shoes. Then she will arrive home, tired, hungry, worried, exhausted from the muddy field, and she will take those shoes off just to put them back again next morning. This is what those shoes show to us, says Heidegger, and this is why that painting is so important, because through this painting the world has opened to us. Works of art should be and should remain where they are created. Later on in his question regarding technology, Heidegger talks about the fact that today, wherever you go in the world, you can eat the same food, you can buy the same things, you can see the same paintings, they travel around the world. But he says we lose our authenticity in that. This is not how it was meant to be. And then a good example, crosses my mind when in 1878 Lord Eugene took that caryatide from Acropolis and brought it to Britain. And she is now in British Museum. Now there are 5 left on Acropolis, but the 6th is missing. And she is here, lost. Here she doesn't mean anything here. Doesn't mean anything to us. Because where she's supposed to be, in a temple of Apollo, and what she meant to do there with the other 5, all 6 of those muses had such a massive importance for generations of people of Athens, giving them the feeling of security, identity, faith, values, and that was all there, built in 5th century by famous Phidia, ordered by Pericles. So you see how much importance that statue has there in Acropolis, in Athens. And here is just a piece of marble for us to go there and look at it, having no clue what is the history of it. It's nothing to do with us. What Apollo? What Acropolis? What Phidia? What is Pericles? We just go there and stare at it like, you know, it's something, whatever it is. And this is when you don't understand art. This is what happens. So Heidegger wants you to know that. Because the world doesn't reveal itself in that way. It reveals itself in something which should be there wherever it was created, on that soil, under that sky, under those divinities, and among those mortals there. That's Heidegger at his best. Okay? (1953) question concerning technology. I spoke last time about that. I'm just going to remind you again. It wasn't the target question last time, but tonight is the main one of the main ones. So what is the problem with technology? Heidegger sees in technology a big problem. He is not against technology, but this is published in 1953. You see, some thinkers, like Nietzsche was, Dostoevsky, Heidegger, they're almost like prophets. They see what is coming, and they warn the world. Don't do this, change it, try to do better, and I will give you an idea what may be the way to do better. So what is the problem with technology? Heidegger says, inspired by Hölderlin's poem, The Rhine, in which Hölderlin depicts River Rhine, is the most beautiful river in Germany. The valleys, the mountains of the Black Forest, Schwarzwald area in Germany, one of the most beautiful areas in the world, landscapes like nowhere else. And Heidegger says, look at the windmill built here 200 years ago. It was built of wood. It used the wind to grind the wheat, to produce flour. Everything was fine. Now, he says, we have electric hydroelectric, what's the word? Dam. But he says it's not the same. Now, he says, with modern technology, we don't just harvest energy from nature in the way that nature intended us to use. What we do, we harvest energy, then we store it, then we accumulate it, and then we transport it. So he calls it standing reserve. And nature never intended anything like that. Why is that a problem? Well, he says the problem is that from this particular example, we can conclude that technology insists on producing as fast and as much as possible, regardless of consequences. Technology is not only the superficial existence outside of being, but turns into essence of Dasein. The Dasein starts being ruled by technology. The man starts thinking as technology wants him to think. Everything quick, everything there, everything as much as I want, everything anytime I want. So why is this the problem? Well, Heidegger says it is a problem because when we have free time, that time is too long for us and we get bored. And in that boredom we consume trivial materials, as we do now, most of the people do, which is again part of technology. So we have turned everything into resource. Even humans have become a resource. Because against technology, he says, humans are against the power against which they don't have any power. 1953. So imagine Heidegger walks in now and says, I told you, you didn't want to listen to me. So technology defines our modern way of living. We become part of it without even knowing it. We don't see that river or nature as our ancestors did. We don't see anything beautiful, and we don't cherish beauty of nature. We don't look at the forest as our grandparents used to do. He says, my grandparent used to go to the Black Forest. He knew every tree. He knew what that tree is. He looked at different animals. He looked at mushrooms. He knew what the weather is going to be, because looking at the plants and the flowers and all different things. That forest talked to him. He looked at the beautiful sky above the forest, which was coming through the leaves. He enjoyed every moment of it. He loved it. He had that relationship with being, as it should be, essential, natural, unraveling. We have lost it, he says. We don't see the wood, forest as forest anymore. We just see forest as a pile of wood now. So it's a very powerful argument, clearly. He says, take for example, cabinet maker. In the past, cabinet maker would have to understand which wood he is using. He would need to know the color of the wood, the density of the wood, different patterns of the wood. He will know how to treat that wood, how to use it, which particular piece of furniture. Would it be a chair, or maybe more suitable for a table, or maybe a bookshelf. He had completely different relationship to that wood and his work than today's industrialized production of furniture. That doesn't exist anymore. You see how dehumanizing it is. You see how much beauty, how much artisanship is lost in that. Everything goes by just, simple touch of a button and things happening. So, is there any way out of it? Heidegger says yes, it is. And this is what he calls safeguarding. Safeguarding of what? For Heidegger, the primal oneness is made out of fourfold, is made out of soil, earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. So we are mortals. We are mortals, and we have to take care of everything else. We have to take care of the land, of the sky, of our divinities, and of everybody else. You see how humanist he is. This is ethics. This is ethics at its best. So we need to take, today we have eco warriors. They probably never heard about Heidegger, and they should use this maybe to empower their actions on a much more sophisticated level. So this fourfold of soil, sky, divinities, and mortals is something where we dwell. So in his paper published in 1954, Building, Dwelling, and Thinking, he talks about dwelling. So we dwell. We dwell on soil that we are born. We dwell under the sky where we are born. We have our divinities as mortals. And this is clearly a huge influence of Hölderlin in his beautiful poem, Homecoming. in which famous romantic Hölderlin talks about coming back home from abroad and seeing all the beautiful mountains, Alps, valleys, rivers. And he says, as much as I was compelled to go to Italy, to Switzerland, to different countries, my heart still wanted me to go home among the people that I knew, among my family, under the sky that I loved, soil that I was born on, divinities that I adored, and among people, mortals, where everybody was a friend. So you see, Hölderlin is in love with his nation. This is nationalism in the most beautiful sense of the word. So loving your fatherland as much as Hölderlin inspired Heidegger to write this paper, dwelling, building, and thinking. Well, there is one place in the essay when he says, one paragraph, and he says, let's think about Black Forest, and let's look at the houses they built 300 years ago. Those houses, as you can see, they're built from materials from that place, that soil. It is beautifully positioned to generate as much light as possible. The roof is high slope all the way to the ground to protect the house from the harsh winter winds and make sure that the snow, when it comes, slides down without any problem. Everything is done in accordance, in harmony with nature. And inside there was an altar where every house has an altar where people actually pay their due to their divinities, and where generations that come after have brought themselves up and been taught in a way as the nature commands, as this part of the world commands. So this is his view of fourfold and taking care of it, safeguarding it. So the last paper that I want to mention, which is very important, is influenced a lot of philosophers after him, especially philosophy of language. And this is the paper called On the Way to Language, published in 1959. So I mentioned a little bit last time what is so interesting about this paper, in which Heidegger actually says that before we speak, we listen to language. Language is saying to us, silently. And everything we say is already been there in the world, in that language. So much so that Heidegger says we think that we speak language, but actually the language speaks us. So if you think, before I say everything, I already hear that in my head. It is already there, is already coming out of me, because the being revealed itself through language. And this is why he says the language is the house of being. This is why he needs Dasein. Not for the Dasein to be the primary player, but the Dasein to be the means to unfolding the being. So language has been there when we were thrown, on the day we were born into the nothing. We learned language which already existed there. And as we learn language, we actually unravel. And we are there just to pass that language to our, the generations that come after us. So very important part in which he says we speak by the way of language. Understand? Language speaks by saying things, by showing. Language speaks in that in, as showing, reaching into all regions of presence, summons from them whatever is present to appear and to fade. Language set the world into motion. Imagine how much we achieve thanks to language. But language was always there. Always there. Because being was always there. And in order to open up itself, being used language, among other things. Another example of importance of language is in this paper, when he, short essay actually, which is called The Secret of Bell Tower. And he talks how the bells, church bells, ringing, created a whole mood of all the villages across that church. Because he says every time the bells rung, we knew there is something coming, some kind of celebration, either that be a religious one or time of the day, but we were always in tune with our divinities, thanks to that bell and the ringing of the bell. So the bell was talking to us by saying nothing. Just that sound of the bell was enough to remind us something is coming, something we have to pay attention to, something which is important to us, something that our lives depend on it. And this is how we live for generations. And he says, I still hear that bell ringing in my head without any words, but it talks to me so much. So you see the way that he explains that, and that is probably for every single one of us. So these were the 5 papers that I wanted to present to you. Again, to remind you, the being is opening to us is this, he calls this unconcealment, and it has to happen, and it happens through art, it happens through language, it happens through safeguarding of the fourfold of the soil, sky, divinities, and mortals. And yes, I think I said everything I have to say. Now I give the floor to you. Thank you.